Hello, everybody. Scott Golden with Pro Wrestling Logic YouTube channel here as we continue our World Class Championship Wrestling Review series. We head into the 19th of June on the year 1982, and a worthwhile program here, certainly, for a variety of reasons, including but not limited to the fact that we get a phenomenal match between former multi-time, six-time at this time, seven-time total NWA champion Harley Race and a young four-year pro in Kerry Von Erich. Phenomenal match, worth going out of your way to see. And I don't normally talk about matches being can't miss, but for the time period, as well as if you like storytelling, if you like old school wrestling that would apply today and would play today, this match worth going out of your way to see, but we'll get there in our main event. We open with Rene Galuro versus El Soterio. This is for the, I believe, Mexican light heavyweight championship. They don't necessarily say Mexican. They did in the ladies match, but both of these individuals brought in to appeal to the Latin American population in Texas for the Texas Stadium program. This is the second week of the Texas Stadium program, the Star Wars program here. Definitely a forward-thinking match. Matter of fact, this is probably the best thus far of the World Class Championship Wrestling programs seen. A lot of what would be considered modern-day lucha here, lucha arm drags, dives over the top rope, things that we would see in today's product all the way back in 1982. So we're talking about, 35, 37 years ago. And it's coupled in with traditional wrestling and grappling and holds. So it's interesting because there's a lot of misconceptions in today's product that lucha can't tell stories, and this match tells a story phenomenally. So Rene does the process of shaking hands with his opponent several times during the match, and I think that in total they shake hands about 4 or 5 times. Several holds to a slower style in the middle, things from arm bars to leg grapevines, half grabs, attempted submissions, really grappling their way through. But it's never fully slow. There's always motion around the concept of the match. And I think if you like the current product and you're looking to see iterations of where it came from, whether it's head scissors takeovers, which is a lost art, by the way, Japanese or Mexican arm drags, different styles of maneuvers, dives, and all of that. If you want to see it put in the proper context, as opposed to the context where it's spot, and the moves are great, but they don't necessarily make sense in a match, this is a match worth going out of your way to see. Two guys under 200 pounds, so proof that light heavyweights could be maybe not a draw, but an attraction. And then they get aggressive by the probably 5 to 6 minute move or moment in the match. We get going to the outside, sending an opponent into a steel post. We get a lot of things that do tell a more good versus evil story. But before we get there, we got classic wrestling and amazing moves. You'll see a snapmare after a jump heel kick. You'll see cutoffs and every move counting, even 8 or 9, 10 minutes into the match. And that's ultimately because matches, A, are called in the ring, which I think is a better way of doing it, but B, the belief that every move needs to matter for the match to make sense and to count is still in practice here. Definitely, if you're of the belief that today's wrestling is, quote, better than the older era, I would challenge with two relative unknown talents, at least to mainstream fans, being in that scenario. Even see a head scissors takeover and that is the victory for El Soterio. We move into the ladies' match next for the ladies' Mexican Championship. Lola Gonzalez versus Irma Gonzalez. Perhaps they're sisters. They don't talk about that in the commentary, but interesting that they have the same last name. I'd never seen either of them before this match. Of course, here in the States, during the late 70s through, mid 90s at least, the trainer for ladies was the late Fabulous Moolah. Very polarizing figure. Some say that she did some unspeakable things. Others still hold her position of authority in the industry, even though she did these things. Not here for that, but suffice to say, both of these women bring a very athletic, for the time, and for any time really, style. A lot of mat-based grappling, surfboards into kickouts. I mean, it's slower than the gentleman we just saw, certainly, but by United States and, North American women's standards for the time, they are moving at a quick pace. They are using a decent variety of holds. They are trying to get, things going. There's a breakdown of the match where, they go to the outside, come back in, back to arm drags, even see a springboard headlock takeover mid-match. Just things that, again, for 1982, are not acceptable. One of the women who gets crotched on the ring ropes is screaming "foul, foul," which I found funny, but the announcer said that was maybe one of the few English words she knew, which is that, could that be borderline racist by today's standards? Maybe, but it also could have been completely true, especially if the women were from Mexico and English was not their first language. So, there's a foray with the referee, and referee gets struck, and one of the Gonzalez sisters gets an advantage. It's hard to tell because, honestly, at least for me, the commentators did not do a sufficient job identifying the differences between the ladies, and so if you're not familiar with them, it was difficult to follow. That was a poor job by the commentators here. Anyway, we move to the later stage of the match. A lot of inside cradles, a lot of jackknife cradles, just different approaches to gaining a win. I think one of the things that's really well done is that the women are placed in a situation where they are, given enough time to do a decent match, also given enough respect that they're allowed to do things that women generally aren't. And it's interesting because the champion defending her championship successfully here, I guess by a lot of people would have been non-surprising. But if you look at the card from the standpoint of your main event being a huge match with implications of the winner getting a shot at Ric Flair for the NWA Heavyweight Championship between Kerry and Harley, Andre the Giant's in town, international light heavyweight champions in town, women are in town. I think one of the things that professional wrestling is losing, because to a degree there's so much oversaturation by single promotions. I don't think there's too much wrestling on TV, but I think certain promotions, WWE minded and closely AEW if they're not careful, are getting to a place where they have too much content, and so each show doesn't feel special. Each show doesn't feel like it's building to something. And when you have to produce 1 to 3 shows 52 weeks a year, you're looking at, 100 to 150 television programs. That's a lot. And then you factor in pay-per-views and specials. You're probably looking at closer to 160 to 175. That's a lot. But it's still no excuse. So We move into an interview with King Kong Bundy. He reiterates that the Von Erichs cheated him, that he is doing better now with Hart and Hussein Incorporated or Limited than he would ever do anywhere else. He's also, upon occasion, known to smoke a cigar. He's, ranting and raving about being ready to be a champion, the opportunities given by Hart and Hussein versus the cheating done by the Von Erichs. Just really interesting there. We then go to a promo where Kevin Von Erich talks greatly about wrestling barefoot. He also acknowledges that David, and I did not know this, was out of town at the time wrestling in the Florida territory, holding both singles and heavyweight championships for the region. He talks about wrestling barefoot and the fact that he feels it gives him better balance, better spring in his step. He says it comes down to the way he was raised. He spent a lot of his time barefoot, and he just was more comfortable that way. Then we move into our main event, which, again, if you're going to watch one thing from the world-class run thus far, I would suggest this matchup. Former six-time heavyweight champion Harley Race against Kerry Von Erich, 4 years pro at this point. What's amazing to me is here we are in 1982, 11 years later, Kerry Von Erich, not even 10 plus years later, Kerry Von Erich has passed away. 5 years later, he's in the motorcycle accident that takes his foot. It's just amazing to me sometimes how life can tragically spiral out of control for a person who has all the potential in the world. If you had shown me this match and I didn't know the rest of Kerry's career, and you showed me this match strictly on its own, I would say to you that you're looking at a future long-term heavyweight champion. Yes, he held the belt for a couple of days, but he never reached his complete potential in wrestling, and I think drug use had a lot to do with that. I think pressure from his father had a lot to do with that. Very basic match, but at the same time, every move counts. The basic story is Kerry going for the claw consistently, Harley trying to break him down and keep him away. Harley does get busted open midway through the match, which I think adds to some of the drama. People certainly are looking at Harley as, a guy passing the torch to Kerry. Kerry is insanely over with this crowd, insanely just a guy that you look at and go, how did he not become one of, if not the biggest person in pro wrestling in the boom period? And you realize that it's the drug use and how sad that is, and what happened in his life that led him to that choice and all sorts of things. Referee gets demolished partway through the match. Referee makes his way back into the ring. Harley's been cheating while the ref is out, including but not limited to using a pile driver, which, depending on the territory, there were NWA territories in 1982 and before and a few years after that would ban the pile driver, but Kerry able to slip out the back door after that maneuver. They actually do go brawling toward the crowd or through the stadium partway through the match. I mean, it breaks down into a brawl. It's been a wrestling match. It's been hard hitting. It's been a lot of things. There's a point where there's a brain buster on the outside of the ring, and Kerry can barely function. Harley protects him and does so very well, but at the same time, it's sold like $1 million, and Harley's on the ropes. Almost reminds me of like the Rocky story, the come from behind aspect. Kerry hits or snags a sleeper about 4 or 5 minutes before the match ends here, and there's a lot of question as to whether things can continue in this way. There's a low blow by Harley, which is done significantly enough away from the referee's gaze that the referee doesn't have to call it. Guys have lost the art of learning or knowing